the middle way for overloaded minds. You know that moment when the heat's pressing down at midday and everything slows to a hush? When a monk places his alms bowl on ancient stone and the whole world seems to exhale. There's something in that stillness that our grinding, overloaded minds are desperately craving, but can't quite name. What if I told you that balance, not the hustle, not the optimization, not the relentless pushing, is actually what produces the deepest, most sustainable results? Einstein once said that a calm and modest life brings more happiness than the pursuit of success combined with constant restlessness. And honestly, he was echoing something the Buddha figured out 2,500 years ago under a tree by a river. We're about to test that ancient instruction, the middle way, and see if it can actually depressurize your life starting tonight. Picture this with me for a second. Wind chimes catching a breeze you didn't know was there. Cicadas humming their eternal song. The sound of sandals on warm stone as someone walks with nowhere urgent to be. That's not escapism. That's the frequency we're tuning into. The one that exists underneath all your notifications and deadlines, and the voice in your head that says you're never doing enough. Buddhist teachings aren't asking you to quit your job or move to a monastery. They're offering you a blueprint you can apply at your desk, in your relationships, in the 2 minutes you have between back-to-back Zoom calls. This isn't theory. This is field-tested wisdom that's helped millions of people stop ricocheting between burnout and numbness and start living from a place where effort doesn't equal suffering. Here's what we're doing together over the next stretch. We're going to explore why both extremes, grinding yourself into dust and completely checking out, are sabotaging the very thing you're after. We'll unpack the Noble Eightfold Path not as some religious doctrine, but as 8 practical tuning adjustments for an overloaded mind that's forgotten how to rest without collapsing. You'll get micro practices you can implement today, not someday, when your life magically gets less chaotic. And by the end, you'll understand why the middle way isn't lukewarm compromise, it's precisely calibrated freedom, the sweet spot where your life finally starts to resonate with the note it was always meant to play. So take a breath, a real one, where you actually feel the exhale. Let the wind chime ring. Let the cicadas hum. Let yourself arrive here fully, even if just for these next few minutes. Because what you're about to learn isn't just information, it's a key to a door you didn't know was there. And on the other side is a version of you that's neither burned out nor tuned out, just tuned in, finally, to what actually matters. Ready? Let's walk this path together. Burnout from maximizing pleasure productivity. Social comparison. You know that feeling when your alarm goes off and you're already exhausted before the day even starts? We've been sold this idea that more is always better. More productivity, more pleasure, more achievements stacked like trophies on a shelf. But here's the thing. While we're chasing that next dopamine hit, scrolling through perfectly curated lives on social media, something inside us is quietly burning out. Buddhist teachings have been whispering about this trap for over 2,000 years, and honestly, they saw us coming from miles away. The grind culture we're drowning in isn't creating the happiness we were promised. It's just leaving us depleted, comparing our messy reality to everyone else's highlight reel. Think about it. When was the last time you actually felt satisfied? Not just distracted or momentarily pleased, but truly at peace with where you are right now. Most of us can't remember because we're too busy maximizing everything. Our calendars packed tighter than a Tokyo subway at rush hour. Our minds constantly calculating if we're ahead or behind some invisible scoreboard. Buddhist wisdom calls this the hungry ghost realm, where no matter how much we consume, we're never full. We've turned life into an optimization problem, believing that if we just tweak the formula one more time, we'll finally crack the code to lasting contentment. But what if the formula itself is broken? Here's where things get interesting and where Buddhist mindfulness starts to feel less like ancient philosophy and more like a lifeline. Every productivity hack, every comparison we make, every should we pile onto our shoulders. These aren't making us stronger. They're tuning our strings so tight that we're about to snap. The Four Noble Truths weren't just observations about suffering. They were a roadmap out of this exact predicament we've created for ourselves. So before we dive deeper into the Dharma talks that could actually shift your experience, let's pause on this image. Imagine a string on an instrument and ask yourself, how tight is yours right now? The overtuned string, too tight snaps, too loose buzzes. Picture a master musician sitting cross-legged in a monastery courtyard, cradling a centuries-old lute in his weathered hands. He plucks a string, too tight, and the sound that comes out is sharp, strained, almost painful to hear. It's the sonic equivalent of your jaw clenching during a deadline that won't quit. Then he loosens it completely, and the string just buzzes against the wood, producing nothing but a dull, lifeless thud. That's you on Sunday afternoon, scrolling mindlessly because you've got nothing left to give. Buddhist philosophy has used this metaphor for thousands of years because it cuts straight to the heart of our modern struggle. We're either cranked up to 11 or completely flatlined, and neither extreme produces the music we're meant to play. Now here's where this gets personal, and where Buddhist spirituality stops being abstract and starts being your actual life. When you're overtuned, pushing through exhaustion, saying yes to everything, optimizing every single moment, you might look productive on the outside, but inside, you're one more email away from snapping completely. We've all been there, white-knuckling our way through another week, telling ourselves we'll rest after this project, after this quarter, after we've proven whatever it is we think we need to prove. The string doesn't care about your reasons. It just knows tension, and tension always has a breaking point. Buddhist monks' teachings remind us that sustainability isn't weakness. It's wisdom recognizing that broken strings make no sound at all. But flip to the other extreme, and you'll find an equally uncomfortable truth that most self-help gurus won't tell you. When we loosen the string too much, giving up, checking out, letting everything slide into apathy, we think we're being kind to ourselves, but really, we're just buzzing against the wood. There's no resonance, no depth, no music that makes your soul say, yes, this is it. Daily Buddhist practice isn't about becoming a wet noodle. It's about finding that sweet spot where effort meets ease, where discipline dances with compassion. So, if both extremes fail us, if grinding breaks us and giving up empties us, then what's the tuning that actually lets us sing? If extremes fail, what tuning sustains the note? Let's sit with that question for a moment, because it's not rhetorical. It's the most practical thing you'll consider all week. If pushing harder leaves you shattered and backing off leaves you hollow, then where exactly do we land? This isn't some mystical riddle that Buddhist teachings expect you to figure out in a cave after 20 years of silence. It's an urgent, right-now question that affects whether you wake up tomorrow feeling dread or possibility. The answer exists, and it's been road-tested for millennia, but here's the catch. It requires us to completely abandon the extremist thinking that our culture has programmed into our bones. We've been taught that life is a binary, hustle or surrender, win or lose, on or off. But what if the music only happens in the middle? Think about the best moments of your life, the ones that still glow when you remember them. I'd bet my last dollar they weren't happening during an all-nighter fueled by energy drinks, and they probably weren't during a Netflix binge where you watched 8 episodes without moving. They happened when you were present, engaged, flowing, when effort felt natural and rest felt earned, when you were neither forcing nor floating. Buddhist wisdom calls this the middle way, but don't let the name fool you into thinking it's some boring compromise or lukewarm half-life. This is precision tuning, the exact tension that transforms potential energy into actual beauty, the Goldilocks zone where your life finally sounds like the song it was always meant to be. So here's where we stop theorizing and start practicing, because knowing about the middle way is useless if we can't actually find it in our daily chaos. The Noble Eightfold Path isn't just philosophy, it's the instruction manual for tuning your string, step by step, choice by choice, breath by breath. Before we dive into those 8 factors, though, let me tell you a story about a young prince who learned this lesson from the most unexpected teacher, in the most unexpected moment, and how that single instruction changed not just his life, but the trajectory of human understanding itself. Dharma. Story. Young Siddhartha hears a lute lesson. Not too tight, not too loose. Awakening in a single instruction. Picture this. Siddhartha Gautama, the man who would become the Buddha, is sitting by a riverbank after nearly starving himself to death for 6 years straight. He'd left behind palaces and pleasure, convinced that enlightenment required extreme asceticism, the ultimate overtuned string, if you will. His ribs are showing, his body's wrecked, and honestly, he's gotten nowhere closer to the truth he's been chasing. Then a boat drifts by carrying a music teacher and his student, and the teacher's voice floats across the water. If you tighten the string too much, it will snap. If you leave it too loose, it won't play. Buddhist stories and parables don't get more perfect than this. The universe literally delivering the answer on a passing boat, while our guy is at his lowest point. Now here's what makes this moment so powerful, and why it's not just some nice tale, but actual Buddhist spirituality in action. Siddhartha doesn't just hear the words. He feels them reverberate through every cell of his exhausted body. All those years of extremes, first drowning in luxury, then torturing himself with deprivation, suddenly crystallize into a single, blindingly obvious truth. Balance isn't weakness, it's the only thing that actually works. He accepts a bowl of rice milk from a kind stranger, breaking his hardcore ascetic vows, sits down under a tree, and within hours, achieves the awakening that had eluded him through every extreme effort. The middle way wasn't a compromise. It was the precise tuning that allowed enlightenment to happen naturally, like a string finally finding its note. This story matters to us right now because we're all doing our own version of Siddhartha's mistake. Maybe you're grinding yourself into dust at work, or maybe you've swung the other direction and you're coasting through life on autopilot. Either way, you're missing the frequency where transformation actually lives. Zen meditation isn't about sitting perfectly still for hours. It's about finding that middle tension where awareness can bloom without force. The Dharma talks that followed Buddha's awakening all point back to this river moment, this floating instruction that changed everything. So what does this ancient lesson have to do with your modern suffering? Dharma, 2 arrows, plus 4. Noble truths, 4 short paras. Let me hit you with something that'll probably make you uncomfortable. Most of your suffering is optional. Yeah, I know. Bold claim. Especially when your inbox is exploding and your rent is due and everything feels like it's on fire. But Buddhist teachings have this concept called the 2 arrows. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The first arrow is life's inevitable pain. The actual stuff that happens, like getting sick, losing someone, facing rejection, dealing with traffic. That arrow's coming whether you like it or not. You're alive, so you're gonna get hit. But here's the kicker. The second arrow is the one we shoot at ourselves. The story we tell about the pain, the spiral of why me, the comparison to others who seem fine, the catastrophizing about what it all means. We're so busy reacting to our reactions that we've doubled our suffering without even realizing it. Now, Buddhism for beginners often starts here, with the 4 Noble Truths, because they're essentially a diagnosis and treatment plan for this exact pattern we're trapped in. First Noble Truth, suffering exists. Duh, we've established that with our 2 arrows. Second Noble Truth, suffering has a cause, and spoiler alert, it's not your boss or your ex or the economy. It's our constant craving for things to be different than they are. Our addiction to grasping what feels good and pushing away what feels bad. We're exhausting ourselves trying to control an uncontrollable universe, tuning our strings tighter and tighter, hoping that if we just manipulate reality hard enough, we'll finally feel safe. Third Noble Truth drops the good news. This cycle can actually end. There's a way out of the hamster wheel, a frequency where peace isn't conditional on everything going your way. And that brings us to the 4th Noble Truth, which is where Buddhist philosophy stops being theoretical and becomes your actual game plan, the Noble Eightfold Path. Think of it as 8 adjustments you can make to find that perfect string tension we've been talking about. Not 8 commandments you'll fail at, but 8 practices that gradually retune your entire life. Right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration, each one addressing a different aspect of how you show up in the world. Buddhist mindfulness isn't just about sitting on a cushion and watching your breath. It's about rewiring how you see, speak, act, and relate to every single moment of your existence. Here's what most people miss, though, and why so many give up before they even start. These aren't separate practices you tick off a checklist. They're 8 facets of the same diamond, 8 strings on the same instrument, all working together to produce a life that actually resonates with truth instead of just reacting to chaos. Vipassana meditation will show you the patterns. The Eightfold Path gives you the tools to rewrite them. So let's stop talking about suffering in abstract terms and start getting practical. because each of these 8 factors has immediate, applicable, transform your Tuesday afternoon kind of power, and we're about to break down exactly how to use them. Dharma, become the river channel. Let waters flow without flooding or drought. Imagine you're standing beside a river, watching water move through its channel. Not a raging flood that destroys everything in its path, not a dried-up creek bed cracking under the sun, but a steady, purposeful flow that nourishes everything it touches. This is what Buddhist life lessons are pointing us toward. Becoming the channel, not the water itself. We spend so much energy trying to control the currents, damming them up when we're scared, forcing them faster when we're ambitious, that we forget our job isn't to micromanage every drop. It's to shape a container strong enough and flexible enough to let life move through us without either overwhelming us or leaving us empty. The middle way isn't about controlling outcomes. It's about becoming the kind of vessel that can hold whatever comes with grace and without breaking. Now here's where this metaphor gets really interesting for your actual daily existence, and where Buddhist spirituality becomes less woo-woo and more like hydro-engineering for your soul. When you're flooding, saying yes to everything, overcommitting, letting work spill into every corner of your life, you're not being generous or productive. You're eroding your own banks, causing damage to yourself and everyone downstream. We've normalized this flooding as hustle or dedication, but the truth is, uncontained water doesn't nourish, it destroys. Conversely, when you're in drought mode, withdrawn, apathetic, hoarding your energy like it's a finite resource you'll never get back, nothing grows, nothing moves, and the channel itself starts to crack and crumble. Daily Buddhist practice is about maintaining that flow, checking your banks, adjusting when you notice you're running too high or too low. The beautiful thing about this river channel metaphor is that it completely reframes what we think of as balance. It's not a static state you achieve once and then you're done. Rivers change with seasons, with rainfall, with the landscape they move through. And so do you. That's not failure, that's just how channels work. Buddhist monks' teachings emphasize this dynamic equilibrium. You're not trying to freeze yourself into perfect stillness. You're developing the awareness to notice when you're flooding or drying up, and the skill to make micro-adjustments before things get catastrophic. So as we move into the practical guide, the 8 specific ways to tend your channel, remember, we're not building concrete walls here. We're learning to dance with flow itself. Practical guide, the Noble Eightfold Path. Right view, see life as process, not scoreboard. Let's talk about the lens you're wearing right now, the one that's coloring everything you see. Because right view isn't about positive thinking or manifesting your dreams. It's about seeing reality as it actually is, not as your anxiety tells you it should be. We've been conditioned to view life as a scoreboard, wins and losses, successes and failures, people who are crushing it, and people who are falling behind. Buddhist wisdom asks us to completely shatter that frame and see life as a process instead, a constantly evolving experiment where nothing is final and everything is feedback. When you view your quarterly OKRs as experiments, rather than verdicts on your worth, suddenly that failed project becomes data, not devastation. The Noble Eightfold Path starts here because if you can't see clearly, every other step will be built on distorted ground. Here's a concrete example that'll land this in your actual work life. Think about the last time you missed a goal or a project didn't go as planned. With scoreboard view, that moment probably sent you spiraling. I'm not good enough. I'll never get promoted. Everyone else has it figured out except me. But with process view, informed by Buddhist philosophy, that same moment becomes fascinating. What worked? What didn't? What can we iterate on? What did I learn about myself, my team, the market? See the difference? One perspective crushes you under the weight of judgment. The other keeps you curious, adaptive, alive. Dharma talks emphasize this again and again. Suffering doesn't come from the events themselves. It comes from the rigid stories we tell about what those events mean about us. So here's your micro CTA, your tiny tuning adjustment for right view. Take one thing you've labeled as a failure in the past month, a conversation that went sideways, a habit you didn't stick to, a goal you didn't hit, and literally write it down with a new frame. Iteration number 1 of whatever it was. Just that simple act of renaming begins to loosen the death grip of judgment and opens up space for Buddhist mindfulness to actually breathe in your life. You're not lowering your standards. You're upgrading your operating system from binary, pass-fail, to iterative, learn, adapt. And once you start seeing with clearer eyes, you'll realize that the intention behind your actions matters just as much as the actions themselves, which is exactly where we're heading next. Practical guide, the Noble Eightfold Path, right intention, goodwill beats performative perfection. Before you walk into that meeting, send that email, or start that project, there's a split-second moment where you set your inner compass, and most of us blow right past it without noticing. Right intention isn't about having pure, angelic thoughts all the time. It's about getting honest with yourself about what's actually driving you in any given moment. Are you about to pitch this idea because it genuinely serves your users? Or are you trying to prove to your boss and yourself that you're worthy of taking up space in the room? Buddhist teachings cut through our self-deception like a hot knife. When our intention is rooted in fear, comparison, or the need to perform our value, even our successes leave us feeling empty because we're building on shaky ground. But when we anchor our actions in goodwill, genuine care for the outcome and the people involved, everything shifts, even if the results look identical on paper. Let me give you an example that's probably happened to you this week. You're preparing for a presentation, and there are two possible intentions running the show backstage. Option A: I need to nail this so everyone thinks I'm competent and my job is secure. That's fear-based, self-focused, exhausting. You'll be overtuned, trying to control everyone's perception of you. Option B: I want to communicate this solution clearly because it could genuinely help our users solve a real problem. That's service-based, other-focused, energizing. You're tuned to the right frequency because your worth isn't on trial. Buddhist spirituality isn't naive about the realities of work and survival, but it does insist that when we lead with goodwill instead of self-protection, we paradoxically become more effective, more creative, more resilient. The string plays better when it's not strangling itself with the need to impress. Here's your micro CTA for right intention, and I want you to actually do this before your next important interaction. Write a one-sentence serving statement about who or what you're there to help, and put it at the top of your slide deck, your notebook, or even just a sticky note on your laptop. Something like, "I'm here to clarify the path forward for our team," or "This meeting serves our customers' need for faster support." It sounds almost too simple, but Buddhist mindfulness practice is full of these tiny anchors that reorient your entire nervous system away from performance anxiety and toward genuine presence. And once your intention is clean, you'll notice that the words coming out of your mouth start to land differently, which brings us to the razor-sharp practice of right speech. Practical guide, the Noble Eightfold Path. Right speech, de-escalate heat, add clarity. Words are wild, aren't they? They can build bridges or burn them down, and here's the thing that Buddhist wisdom has known forever. Most of us are walking around with our speech on autopilot, reacting instead of responding, venting instead of communicating. Right speech isn't about being fake nice or swallowing your truth. It's about using words as precision instruments rather than blunt weapons. Think about the last Slack thread that went sideways. Someone dropped a sarcastic comment, someone else got defensive, and suddenly a simple question about project timelines turned into a passive-aggressive war zone that nobody actually wanted. The Four Noble Truths remind us that we're constantly creating suffering through our reactions, and nowhere is that more visible than in how we speak when we're triggered, tired, or feeling misunderstood. Let me break down what right speech actually looks like in your daily digital battlefield, because this isn't some monastery-only practice. This is survival skills for modern communication. Before you hit send on that spicy reply, Buddhist philosophy asks you to run it through a quick filter. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? And here's the fourth one that people always forget. Is it the right time? You might have something totally valid to say, but if the other person is maxed out, or the whole team is in crisis mode, your truth bomb is just going to land like regular bomb. Instead of using sarcasm as a shield, we've all done it, that little edge in our message that says, "I'm annoyed but trying to sound casual." Try replacing it with a clarifying question. "Hey, can you help me understand the thinking behind this deadline?" Same information exchange, zero collateral damage. Here's your micro CTA for right speech, and I'm challenging you to try this literally today. Find one message where you're about to make an accusation or assumption and reframe it as a genuine question instead. Turn "you never respond to my emails" into "I'm not sure if my last message got buried. What's the best way to reach you when things are time sensitive?" Notice how the second version de-escalates heat and adds clarity, which is exactly what daily Buddhist practice is designed to do. Tune your communication so it actually solves problems instead of creating new ones. And once your words are landing clean, you'll start noticing whether your actions match your intentions, which is the territory we're stepping into next. Practical guide: the Noble Eightfold Path. Right action, minimal harm, maximal coherence. Your actions are telling a story about who you are, whether you're paying attention or not. And right action is about making sure that story is one you'd actually want to live inside. This isn't about moral perfection or never making mistakes. It's about asking yourself before you move, does this action cause unnecessary harm, and does it align with the person I'm trying to become? Buddhist teachings frame this as minimal harm, maximal coherence, which sounds simple until you realize how often we compromise ourselves in tiny ways that add up to a life that feels fragmented and exhausting. Maybe you say yes to every meeting request even though it's destroying your deep work time, or you stay silent when you see something unethical because speaking up feels risky. Each small misalignment is like a micro-betrayal of yourself, and over time, those betrayals tune your strings so tight with resentment and confusion that you forget what your own note even sounds like. Let's get tactical about what right action looks like when you're drowning in demands and everyone wants a piece of you. Imagine you've got back-to-back meetings scheduled, zero time to actually think or create, and another quick call request just landed in your inbox. Old pattern. Say yes, overextend, show up frazzled, produce mediocre work, resent everyone including yourself. Right action pattern. Block your deep work hours on your calendar like they're sacred, and when that request comes in, decline it kindly with a clear boundary. I've got focused work blocked for this afternoon, but I'm free Thursday at 2. Does that work? You're not being selfish, you're being coherent, protecting the conditions you need to actually deliver value instead of just performing busyness. The Noble Eightfold Path isn't about being a pushover. It's about having enough self-respect to set up your life so you're not constantly operating from depletion. Here's your micro CTA for right action, and this one might sting a little. Identify one non-essential task or commitment that's draining your energy without adding real value, and decline it, respectfully, clearly, without over-explaining or apologizing for having boundaries. Maybe it's that recurring meeting where you're not actually needed, or that favor someone keeps asking that you've been doing out of guilt. Buddhist mindfulness helps you distinguish between genuine service and people-pleasing, between flexibility and self-abandonment. When your actions start aligning with your actual values instead of your fears, you'll notice something interesting. Your work itself starts to feel different, less like performance and more like expression. Which brings us to the deeper question of whether your livelihood is feeding your soul or slowly starving it. Practical guide: the Noble Eightfold Path. Right livelihood, align paycheck and principles. Let's have the conversation that most people avoid until they're already burned out and updating their resume at 2 a.m. The one about whether what you do for money is slowly eroding who you are as a person. Right. Livelihood isn't some privilege-only concept where you quit your job to become a yoga teacher. It's about honestly examining whether your work causes harm, exploits vulnerability, or requires you to check your values at the door every single morning. Buddhist philosophy doesn't demand that you're saving the world with every paycheck, but it does ask, can you do this work without fragmenting yourself, without becoming someone you don't recognize? Maybe you're in marketing and you're being asked to manipulate people's insecurities to sell products they don't need. Or you're in finance and you're watching ethically questionable deals get rubber-stamped because everyone's chasing quarterly targets. Those moments where you feel that internal cringe, that's your string getting overtuned in a direction it wasn't meant to go. Now, I know what you're thinking. That's nice, but I've got bills to pay and a family to feed. I can't just quit and become a Buddhist monk. Fair enough, and honestly, Dharma talks about right livelihood aren't asking you to abandon responsibility. They're asking you to look for areas where you can bring more alignment, even in small ways. Maybe you can't overhaul your entire career right now, but could you suggest an ethics review for that campaign that feels sketchy? Could you raise questions about vendor practices in your next team meeting? Could you start exploring adjacent roles within your company that feel more aligned with who you're becoming? Buddhism for beginners often gets stuck here because they think it's all or nothing, but the middle way applies to livelihood too. You don't have to blow up your life, but you do have to stop pretending that total misalignment is sustainable without consequence. Here's your micro CTA for right livelihood, and this one's about bringing consciousness to the intersection of money and meaning. Schedule a 15-minute monthly impact check with yourself or your team, where you honestly assess whether your work is causing harm or creating value in the world. Write down 3 questions. What positive impact did our work have this month? Where did we potentially cause harm or compromise our values? What's one adjustment we could make next month to increase alignment? Buddhist spirituality isn't naive about economic realities, but it does insist that when we repeatedly violate our own integrity for a paycheck, we pay a price that no salary can offset. And once you start aligning what you do with who you are, you'll need a completely different relationship with effort itself, which is exactly where we're headed next. Practical guide, the Noble Eightfold Path, right effort, gentle persistence over heroic sprints. We need to talk about your relationship with effort, because chances are, you've been taught that real achievement requires suffering, that if it doesn't hurt, you're not trying hard enough. Right effort completely flips that script, and honestly, it might be the most counterintuitive part of Buddhist teachings for those of us raised on hustle culture. This isn't about becoming lazy or unmotivated. It's about recognizing that sustainable change happens through gentle persistence, not heroic sprints that leave you face down on the pavement. Think about every New Year's resolution you've ever made. That burst of intense willpower where you're going to meditate for an hour, hit the gym daily, overhaul your diet, and learn Mandarin all at once. How'd that work out? Most of us crash within 2 weeks because we overtune the string, mistaking dramatic effort for effective effort, confusing self-punishment with self-improvement. Buddhist wisdom has this beautiful concept that feels almost rebellious in our productivity-obsessed world. The idea that 1% daily improvements consistently applied will transform your life more than any heroic sprint ever could. Vipassana meditation doesn't ask you to sit for 8 hours on day 1. It asks you to show up for 10 minutes and actually be present, then do it again tomorrow, and the day after that. Right effort is about finding the minimum effective dose, the amount of energy that moves you forward without burning you out, the sweet spot where discipline feels sustainable instead of punishing. It's using a habit tracker not as a guilt machine but as honest feedback about what you can actually maintain. It's choosing one small practice and protecting it fiercely, rather than juggling 17 self-improvement projects that all collapse under their own weight. Here's your micro CTA for right effort, and this is where the rubber meets the road. Pick exactly one 1% habit, something so small it feels almost ridiculous, like 3 conscious breaths before checking your phone in the morning, or 1 sentence in a gratitude journal before bed, and track it for 7 days without adding anything else. No heroics. No, while I'm at it, I might as well. Just one tiny thing, done with full presence, 7 days in a row. Daily Buddhist practice isn't built on willpower theater where you white-knuckle your way through impossible commitments. It's built on showing up consistently for small things until those small things rewire your entire nervous system. And once you've got gentle persistence online, you'll start noticing the quality of your attention itself, which opens the door to the transformative practice of right mindfulness. Practical guide, the Noble Eightfold Path, right mindfulness, single breath resets between contexts. Here's something wild that nobody tells you. You're probably living 5 different lives simultaneously and wondering why you feel scattered and exhausted. You're in a work call but mentally drafting your grocery list. You're with your kids but replaying that uncomfortable conversation from earlier. You're eating lunch but scrolling through news that's activating your fight or flight response. Right mindfulness isn't about achieving some Zen master state where thoughts never arise. It's about learning to fully land in whatever context you're actually in, even if it's just for a few seconds at a time. Buddhist mindfulness teaches us that the quality of our attention determines the quality of our lives, not how much we accomplish or how many tabs we have open, but whether we're actually present for the moments we're living. And here's the kicker. You can reset your entire nervous system with a single conscious breath between contexts, but most of us blow right past those transition moments like they don't matter. Let me paint you a picture of what this looks like in your actual chaotic day. Because Zen meditation isn't just sitting on a cushion, it's bringing that same quality of presence to doorways, literally and metaphorically. You finish a stressful meeting and you're about to walk into your home where your family is waiting. Instead of dragging all that work tension across the threshold with you, you pause at the door and take 3 full breaths. You feel your feet on the ground. You notice the temperature of the air. You consciously close the chapter you were just in so you can open the next one fresh. Sounds simple, right? But Buddhist monks' teachings emphasize that these micro-transitions are where we either fragment ourselves across a dozen unfinished moments, or we practice arriving fully, again and again, in the only moment that actually exists. This one. Here's your micro-CTA for right mindfulness, and I want you to experiment with this today like it's a game. Practice. Doorway breathing, 5 times. Every time you physically cross a threshold, entering or leaving a room, getting in or out of your car, opening your laptop. Take 3 conscious breaths before proceeding. Feel the exhale. Notice one sensation in your body. Acknowledge what chapter you're closing and what you're opening. Buddhist spirituality isn't asking you to add more to your plate. It's asking you to actually taste what's already on it. And once you start catching yourself in these in-between moments, you'll realize that attention itself is a muscle you can train. Which brings us to the final factor, the deep practice of protecting your focus like it's the most valuable resource you have. Because honestly, it is. Practical guide, the Noble Eightfold Path. Right concentration, protect attention like monastery silence. Let's talk about your attention like it's an endangered species because honestly, that's what it's become in a world designed to fragment, interrupt, and monetize every second of your focus. Right. Concentration isn't about superhuman focus or never getting distracted. It's about recognizing that deep, sustained attention is the soil where everything meaningful grows. Insights, creativity, connection, peace. And then protecting that soil like monks protect the silence of their monastery. Buddhist philosophy has always known what neuroscience is just confirming. When you're constantly context switching, responding to notifications, and allowing every ping to hijack your awareness, you're not just being less productive, you're literally training your brain to be incapable of depth. The overtuned string doesn't just snap from tension, it snaps from never being allowed to sustain a single note long enough to resonate. Think about the last time you had 2 uninterrupted hours to work on something that actually mattered. Not just checking boxes, but creating, thinking, problem-solving at a level that required your whole brain online. Can't remember? You're not alone, and it's not an accident. It's the result of 1,000 small surrenders where we normalized being available to everyone all the time, where we let our calendars become battlegrounds and our attention become a free-for-all. The Noble Eightfold Path asks us to get radical about this. What if you noise-canceled your calendar the same way you noise-cancel your headphones? What if you scheduled monastic hours, meeting-free blocks where your door is closed, your notifications are off, and you're protecting your capacity for deep work like it's a sacred practice? Because according to Dharma Talks, it absolutely is. Here's your micro-CTA for right concentration, and this one requires you to make an actual structural change, not just an intention. Schedule 1 monastic hour this week, 60 minutes blocked on your calendar, labeled clearly, with all notifications silenced, and 1 meaningful task that requires sustained focus. Tell your team you're unavailable during this window. Put your phone in another room, close every tab except the one you need. Buddhist spirituality meets practical productivity right here. You're not escaping reality. You're creating the conditions for your best work and deepest peace to actually emerge. And once you experience what your mind is capable of when it's not being constantly interrupted, you'll start questioning a lot of the chaos you've been accepting as normal, which sets us up perfectly for a fundamental reframe about what happiness actually is. Happiness comes when friction drops. The middle way is not lukewarm, it's precisely tuned freedom. Here's the reframe that changes everything, the insight that makes all 8 of those practices click into a unified whole. Happiness isn't something you achieve by adding more success, more pleasure, more achievements, more stuff. Happiness emerges naturally when you remove the friction between who you are and how you're living. Buddhist teachings have been pointing at this for millennia, but we keep missing it because we're so conditioned to believe that fulfillment comes from acquisition rather than alignment. Every time you practice right view, right speech, right action, every time you tune one of those strings, you're not building happiness. You're removing the obstacles that were blocking it from flowing through you naturally. It's like cleaning a window. You're not creating the light. You're just getting the smudges out of the way so you can finally see what was always there. Now let's destroy a misconception that keeps people from ever trying the middle way. They think it means being lukewarm, settling for mediocrity, living some beige half-life where you never feel anything too intensely. That's not just wrong. It's the exact opposite of what Buddhist wisdom is offering. The middle way is precisely tuned freedom, the frequency where you can play the full range of human experience without snapping or buzzing out. Think about a master musician. They're not holding back or playing it safe. They're accessing depths of expression that only become possible when the instrument is tuned correctly. When you're not flooding or in drought, when your string has the right tension, you don't experience less. You experience more, but without the suffering that comes from constantly fighting reality or abandoning yourself in the process. This is where Buddhist spirituality stops being abstract philosophy and becomes your lived experience. You start noticing that the moments when you feel most alive aren't the ones where you're grinding the hardest or checking out the most completely. They're the moments when effort and ease are dancing together, when you're fully present without forcing, when you're engaged without being consumed. Buddhist life lessons all point back to this. The middle way isn't a compromise between extremes. It's the discovery that there's a completely different dimension of existence that becomes accessible only when you stop oscillating between too tight and too loose. And now that you've got the map, these 8 practices, these metaphors, this ancient instruction floating across the water, the question becomes, what are you actually going to do with it? We're watching golden light slice through a bamboo grove now, that late afternoon glow that makes everything feel both ancient and brand new at the same time. The monk we started with, the one who put down his alms bowl at midday, is bowing to the ordinary, to the stone path, to the worn wood of the temple steps, to the life that keeps flowing whether we're paying attention or not. And here's what that bow is really about. It's gratitude for the middle way, for the discovery that we don't have to snap from overtuning or buzz from neglect. We can find that precise frequency where our lives actually sing. You've just walked through 8 factors, 8 tuning adjustments, 8 ways to stop fragmenting yourself across extremes and start showing up as a coherent, present human being. But here's the thing about Buddhist teachings. They're useless until you actually test them in the laboratory of your own life. So I want to ask you something, and I really want you to answer. Which one of these 8 factors hit you the hardest? Was it right view, seeing your life as process instead of scoreboard? Was it right effort, trading heroic sprints for gentle persistence? Was it right mindfulness, those 3 breaths at doorways that could change everything? Drop a comment below and tell me which factor you're committing to for the next 7 days. And more importantly, tell me why that one called to. What's the friction in your life right now that needs addressing? And here's where it gets even more interesting. Once you start practicing, things are going to shift. Sometimes in ways you didn't expect. Sometimes in ways that are subtle but seismic. I want to hear about those shifts. Come back to this comment section in a week and share what changed when you stopped overtuning your string. Did people respond to you differently when you practiced right speech? Did your work quality improve when you protected 1 monastic hour? Did that doorway breathing actually reset your nervous system between contexts? Your experience matters, your story matters, and honestly, sharing it might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to take their first step on this path. Before you go, if this resonated with you, if something in these Buddhist life lessons felt like a key turning in a lock you didn't know was stuck, do me a favor. Subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. We're dropping weekly practices like this, field-tested wisdom that you can actually use in your overloaded modern life. Next week, we're diving deep into right speech in tough moments, scripts that heal, not harm. And trust me, you're going to want those tools in your back pocket. This isn't just content. This is a community of people learning to tune their strings together, learning to find that middle way in a world that keeps pushing us toward extremes. So here's my final question for you, the one I want you to sit with even after you close this video. What would your life look like if you stopped oscillating between too tight and too loose, and found that frequency where everything, work, relationships, your own inner peace, could finally resonate? Drop your thoughts below. Choose your factor. Track it for 7 days. And let's see what happens when we stop grinding and start tuning. The bamboo grove is still glowing, the monk's still bowing, and your next chapter is waiting. Not in some distant future, but in the very next breath you take. Let's walk this path together,